Usually it's over a period of time where they realize that their beliefs have just evaporated or eroded away. They haven't rejected them necessarily, they've kind of just lost them.
John, welcome back.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
It is so much fun to talk with you. And this is a real issue today. This whole idea of deconstruction of your faith, I mean, it's a fancy word. I'm kind of rephrasing it to just losing what you were taught and not embracing it for whatever reason. So let's go there. What does it mean to deconstruct your faith?
I think what it means is that you've inherited a faith. You've gotten to a point in your life where you're become maybe intellectually mature, self-reflective, and you say, hey, I've accepted all of this, I've believed all of this my entire life, but I'm not really sure if it's really true. For some people who are deconstructing, they're taking apart, they're evaluating, and then they're putting their faith back together in a new way. For some, they're asking the question whether or not Jesus is the way, and they're saying, is Christianity even true? I've believed the whole thing, but I've never really thought much about it. And so now I need to step back, make this faith my own, or reject it. I'm going to look at the evidence, and I'm going to either continue to follow, or I'm going to turn away. Then there are others who would say, I think that Jesus actually is the way. I'm not wondering whether or not Jesus is the way. I'm just now asking, what does the way of Jesus supposed to look like? I've inherited a faith, and now I'm looking at it and thinking, is this really reflective of what the Bible has to say about what Christianity is supposed to look like? Because I'm becoming skeptical that the faith that I have inherited really reflects that. And so you have these two folks, one's asking, what's the way of Jesus? The other's asking if Jesus is the way, taking it apart, analyzing it, and hopefully putting it back together in a way that's reflective of what the Bible teaches. However, oftentimes some people will come to the conclusion, who are asking whether or not Jesus is the way, they'll say, you know what, I came to the conclusion he's not the way. And so now I've deconverted. My deconstruction has led to a deconversion. Other times people say, well, I'm still a Christian, but my deconstruction has led to a different understanding of Christianity. And sometimes that understanding of Christianity isn't very reflective of the historic understanding of Christianity.
Personal experience, you went through a time of deconstruction yourself, which makes it more powerful when you write about it and talk about it. Speak to what the questions were in your own heart and what kind of, journey you went through to get back to faith.
Yes, no one called it deconstruction when
Exactly.
when I went through it. It was, it was just questioning and rethinking. And what happened for me, there was an intellectual and an emotional experience. I came across and had to deal with, if God is completely sovereign, and he's completely good and he knows the future, then what does that entail for salvation? How much free will do people really have? And for the first time, I was exposed to a reformed or a 5-point Calvinist view of theology, and that really caused me a lot of internal mental struggles, because I thought, oh, is God, he's electing people, but not everyone seems like they're going to go to heaven, so did he not elect those people? And is God even really good? And what is this character that I've been telling people about and living for? And I had no idea that there was sort of maybe this side to him. And so I had to really wrestle through and think through that. And then the other piece was experiencing the problem of evil really for the first time in a way, despite the fact that you see things on the news and you know that evil goes on in the world. But when I encountered someone who seemed like they were really seeking God and searching for God, and that got derailed through just an act of violence, and this person was seriously suffering, and as far as I know, never came to know the Lord. I thought, I don't understand how God can be good and loving and allow this to happen to this person who's in my life. And so the experience of evil and the problems of some theological issues really caused me to go into a bit of a tailspin and start to rethink and analyze, pull things apart, look at them, and try and put my faith back together in a way that was a bit more informed, that wasn't so naive, and that reflected what I thought that the Bible said.
Well, I'm sure in so many ways, proof is in the pudding. I mean, look what has happened to you. You came back stronger. You came back better informed and working at an academic level when it comes to faith and teaching kids at Whittier there, what it means to have faith. It's a good outcome. Let's speak specifically to parents. That process that you're describing is really scary. We think the world is falling in if our kids aren't grasping it and embracing it in a way that demonstrates zeal when they're 18, 19, 21, whatever it might be. And parents, there's probably several forks in that road that parents could go down. So what is a good response and the pitfalls for parenting in this moment of challenge that your teenager or 20-something might go through?
I think we want to plant a good seed. And I think that good seed, it has a solid center and has soft edges. And when it comes to my own kids, so let's make it really practical. One of the things that my wife and I are intentional about doing is really trying to make sure they understand what is essential and what really is important when it comes down to what they believe as a follower of Jesus. And we would narrow that down to something, say, like the Apostles' Creed, that this is what is a non-negotiable. If you're going to be a follower of Jesus, at least this is what you need to hold to. But I have to recognize that not everything I believe is a non-negotiable and not everything I believe is an essential. And when I elevate those things to those levels and I make my kids buy into all of them, that sets them up for disaster.
John, let me paint a picture for you that I think drives this all home for me. Not long ago, I was able to play golf with Alice Cooper. He's a big golfer, accepted Christ probably 40 years ago. A pastor actually encouraged him to stay in the rock and roll business to be a witness to others. And I'm not saying anything that isn't out there publicly. But he was, as we were golfing, we were talking about that and the uniqueness of that and how many people within the industry he has talked with. But he said he was talking to one person in the rock and roll business. I think most people would know his name. And his dad was a pastor. And so Alice was talking to him about that and said, what's keeping you from embracing Christ, which is an awesome thing, right? And this individual said, well, my parents, they were good parents. They were Christians, but they kind of shoved it down my throat until I gagged. You don't want your son or daughter to ever say that, that it's something you're gagging on. But it's such a delicate dance that we do with our kids, not to be overbearing or too much or shove it down their throat until they gag. How do we create a meal that they enjoy eating about faith and Christ? And how do we put that on display in a way that represents the Lord well?
I think one of the most important things is that we really live out the Christian faith well.
That's because bottom line, isn't it?
It is. I mean, there's research out there that will say that credibility enhancing displays, sometimes called creds, right? It's the sort of the short form for it in the academic literature, are significant in helping people believe and maintain their faith. What that means is when kids see their parents living out a faith that they speak about and that they say is deeply meaningful to them, when they see them living it out, it really reinforces it, especially when it costs them something. Right? I love football, but I will go to church on Sunday morning, even though I'd rather stay home and watch the NFL. Right? These credibility enhancing displays are really significant because I think that young people recognize what a beautiful life looks like. Right? Young people recognize when someone's living consistently. If we really believe that we live in God's world and that He's designed us a particular way, then there's got to be this intuitive realization when someone is living according to the fabric of reality and living according to it well. And so there's a beauty there.
Let me ask you this. You don't get anything out of a dry well. And as parents, we've got to be putting into that well something that the kids will see and be nourished by. So part of it is our own personal disciplines of devotion and talking about the Lord, not in a way that's shoving it down their throat, just to go back to that for a minute, but in a way that's natural and easy to digest for them. Would you agree with that? I mean, we've got to be able to live it and demonstrate it and be real with it.
Yes. Yeah, Christian Smith, who did the national study on teenage religion and spirituality, 3,000 teenagers he interviewed. At the end, one of his conclusions at the end of it was that you will get from your kids what you are before them. And you can only be what you are before them in a deeply Christ-like way if you're connected to the source, if you are in his word, and if you're spending time in prayer. If you're tapped into the vine, his life will live through you, and your kids will recognize and see that. But if you aren't, then oftentimes what you'll get is sort of a gospel of sin management or behaviorism or living according to a set of rules rather than living according to the life that Jesus gives us. And so I think that's really important, your point, that we need to be connected to the source.
Your daughter went through a little example of this, which again, I think is helpful for people to hear, but Shopkins, which I don't know, I think I have a little more understanding about that, but she lost her Shopkins. Maybe describe what those are and what was the environment.
Shopkins are these tiny little rubber toys.
Kind of a bracelet?
Yeah, so she had a bracelet, and the bracelet allowed the Shopkins to be connected to it. And when she was 6 years old, we went out for the day, and we went apple picking, and she wore her bracelet with all her little Shopkin friends connected to it. And by the time we got back in the car at the end of the day, she looked down at her bracelet, and all of the Shopkins had fallen off the bracelet. And so she was just devastated, and our fun day of apple picking just sort of ended on this really, really sour note.
Scattered all over the field.
Oh, yeah, and we had no idea where they were. And in the book, we say that's often a good analogy for how people walk out of the faith. It's not that they have a one-time point where they say, oh, I don't believe any of this. This is all just absurd. But usually it's over a period of time where they realize that their beliefs have just evaporated or eroded away. They haven't rejected them necessarily. They've kind of just lost them. It is this slow loss of belief over time. And then one day they look down, and just like the Shopkins are gone, their faith is gone.
I want to drill on control a little bit, because I think as parents, boy, when the children are young, you're in control for their safety, for their food consumption, making sure they have enough water. I mean, you're in high control just to help them survive, right? Keep them away from electrical outlets, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's amazing what we go to. And then we have to learn to lessen that control as they become 13, 14, 15. And it's hard. It's hard for a lot of parents to disengage and allow them to fail at home, those kinds of things. So the question is, speak to the issue of control, and how can we, again, come to that fork in the road and make an error in terms of over-controlling or controlling in a biblical context. I mean, even the Lord himself says, hey, I'll give you a choice, life or death. Choose.
I think another really helpful piece in all of this is finding what sometimes are called secondary authority figures, which are people outside of the family that our young people or our children really gravitate towards or really like and appreciate, and who can also fulfill the role of being an authoritative figure that can speak into their life and that they can share things with that they wouldn't with us. And we have to sort of let them go and let them think and let them they're going to do what they're going to do anyway. And the harder we hold on, the more of the sort of the rebound effect will take place once they get out there. It will just, the rebellion will come. And I think having secondary authority figures in their life is really key to that.
I agree.
John, help the parent respond well who has this conversation with their child, who has been kind of secretive about the faith, going to school, going to church, doing the youth group, and they reveal that I'm not sure I believe this. I can imagine just a range of responses. What are those responses, and what's a preferred response?
Right. Well, I had a bit of a experience with this. My daughter, who when she was 11 years old, she said to me one night, I want to tell you something, but I think it's going to make you sad. Oh. And I said, that's okay, you can tell me. And she said, no, I really think it's going to bother you. And I said, well, then I think you really need to tell me. And she said, all right, but I'm sorry, but I just don't think that I believe in heaven. And I thought, wow, like this, I felt the adrenaline welling up within me. I felt the anxiety kind of taking over. And I immediately wanted to start arguing with her and trying to give her answers
the right answer,
and tell her what,
yeah.
Right. And then I could project in my mind, it was like an instant in time, I could just see where her life was going to go, because, well, if you don't believe in heaven, then you start, the next domino that falls is, well, then where do you go after you die? Well, I don't know. And that's, maybe there's no God. And what did Jesus die for? So that we could have a relationship with God and someday be with him. And And I could just see this is the start. And I felt the panic, but I actually had a set of steps already put in place for when this kind of conversation would come up with either one of my kids. And the first thing on my list was don't panic. Because that's the first thing that I think you want to do.
Done.
Oh, very much easier said than done. The second thing I think that we need to do is say, hey, thanks. Thanks for telling me that. Because I know that's got to be really hard for you. And when young people come and say, I'm not sure I believe this anymore, we're talking about maybe their identity, their group of friends, who they are, what their worldview is. This can be really traumatic. And for them to be willing to share this with you means that you have a good relationship with them, I think, which is something to be grateful for. But also to be able to say, hey, thanks. I really appreciate that you're willing to share that with me, because I know that can't be easy. Then I think that the next thing to do is to listen really well and ask some very basic questions, seeking understanding, but nothing more. How long have you been feeling this way? Are you at a settled position, or are you still in process? What are some of the issues that have been challenging for you? Are you interested in inviting me into this conversation? I think those are helpful questions to ask, and I think that we listen far more than we talk as they share what's brought them to this place. Then I think maybe the most important step of all is to say to them, regardless of where you end up in this, whether you end up as someone who is a committed follower of Jesus, like your mother and I are, or you say, I don't believe in any of this anymore, we will still always love you. We'll still be committed to your well-being. We'll still be your biggest champion. We'll always be for you. We will never reject you. You would be surprised at the number of people who I've spoken to who, when they went and told their parents that they no longer believed anymore, it ended up in yelling and screaming. Some of them don't talk to their parents anymore. Some parents refuse to talk to their children anymore because they have left the faith or they have betrayed what they believe. I think it's really important because you want to stay in the conversation. You want to keep lines of communication open. And it's not just a tactic to do that, but it's what Jesus calls us to. He calls us to love people. And we should certainly love our own children, even if they don't believe the same things that we do. I think the next thing that you want to do is I think you want to say, okay, so how do we relate to one another going forward? Because my temptation will be every time we get together will be to talk to you about this, and your temptation will be to want to avoid talking about it at all, because you'll see it as me just trying to pull you back, and I'll see it as you just trying to avoid. So let's set some ground rules. I'll let you set the ground rules. When can we have conversations about this? Once every 6 months? Can you give me some time to process this so I can come back and ask you some questions? And then from there, we will make sure that every time we get together as a family, that this is not always front and center. I think also you need to remember that you need to be in this for the long run. Play the long game. Because as sad as it is, I can think of a number of young people who were on fire for Jesus as teenagers and now have denied the faith, and young people who walked away from the faith as teenagers and who have come back and who are solid believers. Play the long game, because you're going to be with them, I hope, for the rest of their lives, your natural lives. And so you want to make sure that you recognize that at this moment right now is not the moment to try and win them back.
I think the other observation there, John, is the fact that so much of what we as parents project with our kids, it's internally to us disappointing to see them not choose the Lord. It's the guilt we feel about that. It's where did we fall short? It's how did we mess up? And that's why we want to see a different outcome. And it becomes emotional for us, right? Because it's a big F in the grade of spiritual development. And that's how it feels. And then we begin to react either with that anger or that hostility. And man, that is the worst thing you can do, because you are going to push that child away. And oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes I've seen it where when you relax and back down and just have a loving conversation, they begin to turn. And maybe not the first time or the second, but over time, their hearts will reopen so often. And that's what you need to hold out for.
It is. And I think that, if they recognize that you truly love them, right? And that it's not,
that's key.
I'm choosing between following Jesus and you, But you can actually do both. You can follow Jesus and love your children who have walked away from the faith. Then they don't see it as that you have chosen something else over them, which I think can be very very disheartening and very discouraging for them.
Well, this has been terrific. Let's come back next time, continue the discussion. One of the things I do want to talk about is, unlike past generations, there's so much input coming into our kids with social media, instant access to, things that we never would have researched back when. And it gives them maybe a little bit of skepticism. And let's talk about how we can combat that as parents and get them into a healthy place to be skeptics, but still come out on the right side. Can we do that?
Sounds great.
All right. Listen, this is a great book. Before you go, get a hold of us. We'll send you a copy. If you can make a gift of any amount, join in the ministry. Man, we're saving marriages. We're saving babies' lives. We're helping these moms at that point of decision to make the best decision they can make, helping parents through a crisis. That's all going on every day here at Focus on the Family. Be a part of it. Let it accrue to your account in heaven. And if you can make a gift of any amount, monthly or one time, we'll send you a copy of John Marriott's great book, Before You Go, as our way of saying thank you for being part of the ministry.
Yeah, join the support team today. Make a donation when you call 800-A-FAMILY, 800-232-6459, or stop by the program description. We've got all the links and details there. And on behalf of the entire team, thanks for joining us today for Focus on the Family with Jim Daly. I'm John Fuller, inviting you back next time as we continue the conversation with Dr. John Marriott and once again help you and your family thrive in Christ.